April 16, 1947, began like any other spring morning in Texas City, a quiet port town hugging the Gulf of Mexico. The sun rose over rows of refineries and oil tanks, illuminating the hum of America's post-war industrial boom. Children were getting ready for school. Men and women filed into factories, shipyards, and offices. Dockworkers lined up for morning shifts, some lighting cigarettes, unaware that the next few hours would tear their lives, and their town, apart. The SS Grand Camp, a French cargo ship, had been docked at Pier O since April 11, loading goods for Europe. Among its cargo were ordinary items, twine, tobacco, machinery, but deep in the hold were 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate, a compound used as a fertilizer and, in high quantities, an explosive. The same substance had been used in explosives during World War II. Now, in peacetime, it was being repurposed for agriculture. But ammonium nitrate is a chemical that doesn't care if you're growing crops or making bombs. Mishandle it, and the outcome is the same. A faint haze began rising from the Grand Camp's hull around 8 a.m., accompanied by a chemical odor. Longshoremen noticed smoke curling from the ship's lower hold. The crew, instead of calling the fire department, tried to contain the situation themselves. They sealed the hold and pumped in steam, hoping to suffocate the flames without water, which they feared might ruin the cargo. But they didn't know, or chose to ignore, that once ammonium nitrate begins to heat, it creates its own oxygen. It cannot be smothered. The fire was already unstoppable. Smoke billowed higher into the sky, drawing a curious crowd to the waterfront. Schoolchildren stood along the fence lines. Workers paused to watch. Police officers and firefighters arrived, joining the crew in efforts to control the blaze. More than 100 people gathered near the docks, some helping, others just watching. None of them had any idea they were standing next to a ticking bomb. At 9:12 a.m., the SS Grand Camp exploded. The detonation was heard over 150 miles away. A mushroom cloud 2,000 feet high rose into the sky, and a shockwave flattened nearly everything in a 16-block radius. Windows shattered in Houston. Planes flying overhead were buffeted by the blast. Pieces of the ship, including its 2-ton anchor, were found miles away. Entire buildings were vaporized. The blast ignited nearby oil tanks and chemical plants, creating a firestorm that burned for days. The shockwave crushed the city. Steel girders twisted like ribbon. Glass became shrapnel. People were thrown blocks from where they stood. The force registered as a small earthquake. And in an instant, nearly all of the city's fire department was gone. 28 of 29 firefighters died in the blast. First responders, trying to do their job, had unknowingly rushed toward ground zero. The dead were everywhere. Charred, unrecognizable bodies lay strewn across the docks and city streets. Survivors stumbled through smoke and rubble, bloodied, many with ruptured eardrums. Hospitals overflowed. Makeshift morgues were set up in gymnasiums. The city descended into chaos as people searched for missing loved ones. Many would never be found. The explosion had been so violent that it obliterated not just buildings, but people too. But the horror wasn't over. That afternoon, another ship docked nearby, the SS High Flyer, also carrying ammonium nitrate, had caught fire. For hours, the flames crept along its deck. Crews tried to tow it away, but it was too late. At 1:10 a.m., nearly 16 hours after the Grand Camp's blast, the High Flyer exploded too. This second explosion, though smaller, compounded the devastation. It killed 2 more people, injured dozens, and reignited the panic. Fires that had just begun to cool erupted again. Buildings that had barely stood collapsed. And the ground once more shook as though the earth itself were crying out. By sunrise, Texas City was a wasteland. The death toll officially reached 581, but many believe the real number is higher, possibly over 800. Entire families had vanished. More than 5,000 people were injured. Hundreds of children were orphaned. Some victims were never identified. Others were buried in mass graves. The disaster remains the worst industrial accident in American history. In the days that followed, the nation watched in stunned silence. The media called it the day the sky exploded. Photographs of flattened homes, melted vehicles, and smoke-choked skies spread across newspapers. The horror of what happened forced a re-examination of how dangerous materials were transported and stored. Laws were rewritten. Regulations were created. But for the people of Texas City, no amount of change could bring back what was lost. Survivors recall the silence that followed the blasts as being worse than the noise. One man said it was like the world had ended, and I was the only one left. The school bell that rang that morning never rang again. The dock where the Grand Camp once rested no longer existed. And the heart of a proud port town was reduced to ash and echoes. There are stories that emerged in the aftermath that still haunt. A firefighter whose charred helmet was the only thing found. A mother holding her child in death, both frozen in place like statues of smoke. A dockworker blown so far from the pier that he landed in a backyard miles inland, alive but burned beyond recognition. These aren't ghost stories. They are the lingering remnants of something real, something too painful to forget. And yet, amid the ruin, something else took root: resilience. The people of Texas City began to rebuild. Churches held funerals every day for weeks. Families donated clothing and food. Volunteers poured in from other states to help sift through rubble and restore order. It was as though the town refused to be erased. Refused to let the disaster define its story. It took years, but Texas City was reborn. Today, few physical reminders remain of the disaster, but the trauma still lingers in the memories passed down through generations. There's a memorial park now, a stone anchor marking the site where the Grand Camp exploded. The names of the dead are etched in granite. And every April, the city pauses to remember. But perhaps the most chilling truth of all is how preventable it was. Ammonium nitrate had exploded before. In 1921, in Oppau, Germany, a similar accident killed hundreds. There were warnings. There were memos. But bureaucracy and profit motives overrode caution. In Texas City, safety was an afterthought. The docks were busy. The cargo had to move. And no one imagined the unimaginable until it happened. If history teaches anything, it's that human arrogance often plays accomplice to disaster. The Texas City disaster wasn't just an accident. It was a warning, a reminder that even in times of peace, danger can hide in plain sight. That sometimes the greatest threat isn't war, but negligence. And that a single spark, left unchecked, can rewrite the fate of an entire city in seconds. This is the story of a town that stood at the edge of annihilation, and came back. It's a story of loss, heroism, and the haunting power of hindsight. And like all stories we tell here at Lore of the Multiverse, it's not fiction. It's real. Every shattered window, every torn photograph, every name carved into stone. They are the echoes of a day when time stopped, the sky exploded, and a city paid the price for a mistake it never made.